1 Samuel 27. But David said in his heart, "Why, one day I will perish by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than to flee hastily to the land of the Philistines, so that Saul may despair of me, and cease to seek me throughout all the borders of Israel, and so shall I escape out of his hand." Then David arose, and passed, with the 600 men that were with him, to Achish, son of Mauch, king of Gath. And David stayed with Achish in Gath, he and his men, each with his house, David with both his wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelite, and Abigail, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. And Saul, being warned that David had fled to Gath, he no longer cared to seek him out. And David said to Achish, "If I have found favor in your eyes, give me a place in one of the cities of the land, that I may dwell there, for why should your servant dwell with you in the royal city?" So Achish gave him the city of Ziklag that day. So Ziklag belongs to the kings of Judah to this day. And the number of days that David dwelt in the land of the Philistines was 1 year and 4 months. And David went up with his men, and they fell upon the Geshurites, and the Jersites, and the Amalekites, for formerly these were the inhabitants of the land that extends toward Shur, to the land of Egypt. And David smote the land, and gave neither man nor woman life, and took sheep, and oxen, and asses, and camels, and garments, and he returned, and came to Achis. And saying, "Achish, where have you attacked today?" David said, "Over the south of Judah, and over the south of the Jerahmeelites, and over the south of the Canites." And David left neither man nor woman alive, to bring them to Gath, saying, "Lest they report us," saying, so David did. And this was his custom all the days that he dwelt in the land of the Philistines. And Achish trusted David, saying, "He has certainly made himself hated by his people in Israel, therefore shall he be my servant forever." 1 Samuel 28. And it came to pass in those days, when the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle, to make war against Israel, Achish said to David, "Know of a certainty that you and your men will go out with me to the camp." Then David said to Achish, "So you will know what your servant will do." And Achish said to David, "Therefore I will keep you as my guardian forever." And Samuel was already dead, and all Israel had mourned for him, and had buried him in Ramah, which was his city, and Saul had banished the diviners and the sorcerers. And the Philistines gathered together, and came, and encamped in Shunem, and Saul gathered all Israel together, and they encamped in Gilboa. And when Saul saw the camp of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And Saul inquired of the Lord, but the Lord answered him not, neither by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. Then said Saul to his servants, "Seek me a woman that hath a witch's spirit, that I may go to her, and inquire of her." And his servants said to him, "Behold, there is a woman in Endor who has a spirit of divination." And Saul disguised himself, and put on other clothes, and he went with 2 men, and they came to the woman by night, and she said, "I beg you to divine me by the spirit of a witch, and make me go up to whom I tell you." Then the woman said to him, "Behold, you know what Saul has done, how he has destroyed the diviners and the sorcerers from the land. Why then set me a snare to my life, to make me die?" Then Saul swore to him by the Lord, saying, "As the Lord lives, no harm shall come to you for this." The woman then said to him, "To whom shall I bring you up?" And he said, "Bring me up to Samuel." So when the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice, and spoke to Saul, saying, "Why have you deceived me? For thou art Saul." And the king said to him, "Fear not, what do you see?" Then the woman said to Saul, "I see gods coming up from the earth." And she said to him, "How is your figure?" And she said, "An old man is coming up, and he is wrapped in a cloak." Understanding Saul that it was Samuel, he bowed with his face to the ground, and prostrated himself. Samuel said to Saul, "Why did you disturb me by making me go up?" Then said Saul, "I am greatly distressed, because the Philistines war against me, and God has turned away from me, and no longer answers me, either by the ministry of the prophets, or by dreams. Therefore I called you to let me know what I should do." Then Samuel said, "Why then do you ask me, seeing the Lord has forsaken you, and has become your enemy? For the Lord has done to you as he told you by my mouth, and the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand, and given it to your neighbor, David. As you did not listen to the voice of the Lord, and did not execute the fervor of his anger against Amalek, so the Lord has done this to you today. And the Lord will also deliver Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your children will be with me, and the Lord will give the camp of Israel into the hand of the Philistines." And immediately Saul fell down on the ground, and was greatly afraid because of the words of Samuel, and there was no strength in him, because he had not eaten bread all that day and all that night. Then came the woman to Saul, and seeing that he was so troubled, she said to him, "Behold, your handmaid has listened to your voice, and I have put my life in my hand, and have listened to the words you spoke. Now therefore, hear thou also the words of thy handmaid, and I will set a morsel of bread before thee, and eat, that thou mayest have strength to go on the way." But he refused it, and said, "I will not eat." But his servants and the woman constrained him, and he listened to his voice, and he arose from the ground, and sat on a bed. And the woman had a fatted calf at home, and she hurried and killed it, and took flour, and kneaded it, and baked it in unleavened cakes. And he brought them before Saul and his servants, and they ate. Then they got up and left that same night. 1 Samuel 29. And the Philistines gathered all their armies to Aphek, and the Israelites encamped by the fountain that is in Jezreel. And the princes of the Philistines went there by hundreds and by thousands, but David and his men went with Achish in the rear. Then said the princes of the Philistines, "What are these Hebrews doing here?" And Achish said to the princes of the Philistines, "Is not this David, the servant of Saul, king of Israel, who was with me some days or years ago? I haven't found anything in him since the day he rebelled until today." But the princes of the Philistines were very angry with him, and the princes of the Philistines said unto him, "Bring this man back, that he may return to the place where thou hast set him, and that he may not go down with us to battle, lest he become our adversary in battle, for with what could he please his Lord? Would it not be with the heads of these men? Is not this that David, of whom they sang one to another in dances, saying, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s? Then Achish called David and said to him, "As the Lord lives, you are upright, and your coming in and your going out with me in the camp is good in my eyes, for I have found no evil in you from the day you came to me until this day, but in the eyes of princes they do not please. Come back now, then, and go in peace, lest you do evil in the eyes of the princes of the Philistines." Then David said to Achish, "Why? What did I do? Or what have you found in your servant from the day I stood before you until this day, that he should not go and fight against the enemies of my lord the king?" But Achish answered and said to David, "I know, and that indeed in my eyes you are good as an angel of God." But the princes of the Philistines said, "Let him not go up with us to battle. Now therefore, rise up early in the morning with your lord's servants who are with you," and, rising early in the morning, and there being light, departed. So David rose early in the morning, he and his men, to depart in the morning, and returned to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistines went up to Jezreel. 1 Samuel 30. So it came to pass, that when David and his men arrived at Ziklag on the third day, the Amalekites had already invaded the south, and Ziklag, and had wounded Ziklag and burned it with fire. And they had taken captive the women, and all who were in her, both small and great, but they killed no one, only took them with them, and went their way. And David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their women, their sons, and their daughters had been taken away captive. Then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice, and wept, until they had no more strength to weep. David's 2 wives were also taken captive, Ahinoam the Jezreelite, and Abigail the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. And David was greatly distressed, because the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was in bitterness, every one because of his sons and his daughters. Yet David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. And David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, "Bring me, I pray thee, here the ephod." And Abiathar brought the ephod to David. Then David inquired of the Lord, saying, "Shall I pursue this troop? Will I reach it?" And he said to him, "Pursue her, for you will surely overtake her and set everything free." So David departed, he and the 600 men who were with him, and came to the brook Besor, where those who stayed behind stopped. And David pursued them, he and the 400 men, for 200 men remained, because they were not able to cross the brook Besor because they were weary. And they found an Egyptian man in the field, and brought him to David. They gave him bread, and he ate, and they gave him water to drink. They also gave him a piece of dried fig dough and 2 bunches of raisins, and he ate, and his spirit returned, because it had been 3 days and 3 nights since he had eaten bread or drunk water. Then David said to him, "Whose art thou, and where art thou from?" And the Egyptian youth said, "I am servant of an Amalekite man, and my master left me, because I was sick 3 days ago. We invaded the south side of the Cherethites, and the side of Judah, and the south side of Caleb, and we set Ziklag on fire." And David said to him, "Could you go down and lead me to this troop?" And he said to him, "Swear to me by God that you will not kill me or hand me over to my lord." And when he had gone down, he led him, and, behold, they were scattered over the face of the whole earth, eating and drinking and dancing, for all the great spoil which they had taken out of the land of the Philistines and out of the land of Judah. And David smote them from evening until the next day even, not one of them escaped, but only 400 young men who, mounted on camels, fled. So David saved all that the Amalekites took, his 2 wives also saved David. And they lacked no one, from the least to the greatest, even to sons and daughters, and also from the spoil to all that they had taken from them, all David brought back. David also took all the sheep and herds, and led them before the other cattle, and said, "This is David's spoil." And when David came to the 200 men who were weary and could not follow David, and who were left behind at the brook Besor, these went out to meet David and the people who were with him, and when David came up with the people, he greeted them in peace. Then all the wicked among the men who had gone with David answered and said, "Since they did not go with us, we will not give them of the spoil which we freed, but let each one take his wife and children and go." But David said, "Ye shall not do so, my brethren, with what the Lord hath given us, who preserved us, and delivered the troop that came against us, into our hand. And who would listen to you in this? For what is the part of those who went down to battle, such will also be the part of those who stayed with the baggage, will equally share." Which it was from that day forward, because he made it a statute and an ordinance in Israel to this day. And when David came to Ziklag, he sent of the spoil to the elders of Judah, his friends, saying, "Behold, a blessing for you from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord." To those of Bethel, and to those of Ramoth in the south, and to those of Jather, and those of Aroer, and those of Siphmoth, and those of Estemoa, and to those of Rasel, and to those who were in the Jerahmeelite cities, and in the cities of the Canaanites, and those of Hormah, and those of Chorasan, and those of Attica, and to those of Hebron, and to all the places where David had gone, he and his men. 1 Samuel 31. So the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines, and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines pursued Saul and his sons, and they killed Jonathan, and Abinadab, and Malchishua, Saul's sons. And the battle raged against Saul, and the archers overtook him, and he was very afraid because of the archers. Then Saul said to his page-in-arms, "Draw your sword and run me through it, lest these uncircumcised men come and run me through and mock me." But his page-at-arms would not, because he feared too much, so Saul took his sword and fell on it. When his page-in-arms saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his sword and died with him. So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor-bearer, and all his men also died that day together. And when the men of Israel, who were on this side of the valley and on this side Jordan, saw that the men of Israel had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook the cities, and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them. So it happened the next day, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his 3 sons lying on Mount Gilboa. And they cut off his head, and stripped him of his weapons, and sent them through the land of the Philistines all around, to preach it in the temple of their idols and among the people. And they put his weapons in the temple of Astarte, and his body they nailed to the wall of Bethshan. When the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, every valiant man arose, and they walked all night, and they took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan, and, coming to Jabesh, they burned them. And they took his bones, and buried them under a tree in Jabesh, and fasted 7 days. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and make a comment.